So I think we can all agree, and by all of us, I mean me telling you guys to agree with me here, that Melinda Gates is taking over everything, right?
It's over. Yeah.
I mean, it's clear.
The divorce was kind of a white pill for me because I was getting kind of worried about all that land that he's buying up. And I feel like now that's going to hopefully get like broken up a little bit as a result of this.
So Melinda, that's like Melinda's just doing the same
even
thing.
if it only gets broken half, you know what I mean? Like that's still better than just one guy having it.
Oh God, they like, I don't know. They act like Melinda doesn't like, how do you marry Bill Gates for so long? And you're just like, I just found out about this stuff. Like they say she like consulted a lawyer, you know what I mean, for when she found out he hung out with Epstein and stuff. And it's like, oh my God, I don't know. They're doing these soft cancellations, I think, right now, is my theory, with everybody involved in the COVID process. And I have nothing to base this on except just
I didn't predict this.
No, this is just me. So it's I think, look, Cuomo was the first one, right? Cuomo gets canceled for, being Italian. And then you get Gates, right? And then not Matt Gates, by the way, but you get Bill Gates, who gets thrown aside for being like having like naked pool parties and stuff, which is like, maybe like the reason number 1300 on the list I would cancel Bill Gates. And then my next thing is that Fauci's going to get Me Too'd. I think he's going to get,
so?
Yes, absolutely, because of the lab leak. But to hide the lab leak, it's going to be something like this, or he steps down. You know what I mean? Like he does this Lou Gehrig speech at like at Yankee Stadium, like, today I consider myself, and then steps down.
He could do that because his age. Fauci's a lot older, I think, than a lot of people realize. So he could just do that. And I think that would just sort of be a smooth exit. Yeah. One of my theories on Fauci has always been like the reason he was so, enthusiastic about all the COVID stuff was to be remembered for something other than botching the AIDS thing in the 80s. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I think that has something to do with what's gone on for the past, year and a half.
Yeah, he's just the whole year and a half is just one man's psychosomatic trauma.
Yeah, he just keeps looking at that same AIDS picture on his wall, like, oh, I gotta get back for this. Let me move this gain of function lab to China. We're gonna get rolling, boys. Get the squad back together, boys. Let's go.
I was thinking they could always like give him a fake COVID death to like take him out and instill fear. Two birds, one stone kind of vibe, Yeah. I just saw that the other day.
From the 5 to the 6, we be in the mix with that RareCandy paint job on the whip. I need food for the kids, money for the rent. Fuck a lockdown, baby, I can't do that shit. And I don't never vote, cause I'm fucking broke. And either way, I know the police ain't gon' leave me alone. On a plane by the visit Glen Rock, need crypto told me I should bring the Glock with me. So I packed up my piece and I'm sliding. Cause we might get caught up in a riot. Middle finger Trump, middle finger Biden. Fuck a left, fuck a right, is you riding? Know you love to see it, dudes rocking. Ain't no politics, baby, we just talking. From the birds to the bricks, we be in the mix with that RareCandy paint job on the whip. Who you with?
All right, so we've got Jeff Vandroux here today. I said your name right, Jeff, right?
You did, yeah.
Okay, cool. So Jeff, you have a business that we first off, what's your Twitter handle? Can you drop it for us here?
It's at Vandroux ATTY CPA.
Got it. Okay, so you have a business, and correct me if I'm wrong here, where you can convert 401ks into Bitcoin IRAs.
Yeah. So basically, if you have a 401k from an old employer or you have an existing IRA, you can do a rollover. I'm not a financial services firm. Actually, I'm a lawyer. And what we do is we set up a legal structure so that you can hold Bitcoin in your IRA, but while you hold your own private keys. So you don't have to use any sort of financial institution as a custodian of your Bitcoin. And I've actually been doing this since 2014.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, damn. Yeah. That's great. I know I have a lot of questions about all that, and it's something that I think is needed in today's world. And I've never been like shuffling money away into a 401k, but I knew it was always important. And this is like a way to do it in a cool way, I think. Right. And
right.
To put it in like a dumb bro term, but there's a lot of reasons
why. A lot of people just have, from an old job or whatever, they've got money in this retirement account that they've been saving away. And if you want to be able to put it in Bitcoin and try, as an inflation hedge, or, whatever your particular outlook on Bitcoin might be, this is a way to do it in a way where, where you hold the keys, which is important on two counts. Number one, when you hold your own keys, that's how the money is uncensorable. It can't be, can't just be seized. You can't get, canceled for saying or thinking the wrong thing. And, we've seen people get debanked for stuff like that. That can't happen if you're holding your own keys. And then secondly, just for a practical matter, it's a lot cheaper. You don't have to pay a storage fee or anything to a third-party custodian.
Yeah. Cool.
You should ask him that trading question, because I'm interested.
Yeah. Wait, about the I figured, I didn't know when we would get to this in the episode, but it's dope
now. Yeah,
for sure.
It's on the docket now. Yeah.
No, I've heard of like people being able to, because correct me, just tell me how far this can go, because I'm okay. Like, I've been learning just so much about trading and even like scalping and pretty short time frame stuff. And I know this is a long-term investment. Are you able to take trades on this Bitcoin?
Yeah,
long and short under your own keys. And how does that work with the taxes and everything? Like how much
you
can you put
can't
in
short. So basically you can trade as much as you want, and they're all non-taxable transactions because they're taking place within an IRA.
So when you say trade without short, just buy and sell spot, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Shorting. Okay. So under the IRS rules, basically shorting with retirement fund assets is a problem. But anything.
Why? So yeah, jeez. Are you kidding me?
Sorry, that was funny.
Yeah.
But your standard long trades are fine.
Yeah. So, and no leverage too.
Yes, no leverage, no margin.
So what exchange do you do that on, or what who's the, I know you hold your own keys, but who's the mediator of this legally? Can you do it through Coinbase or Coinbase Pro?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I set up an entity for you, an investment trust that's owned by your IRA, over which you're the trustee. So it's its own entity with its own tax ID number. So any exchange that will allow you to open what's called an institutional account, registered to an entity, you'd be able to use that.
And you're able, and you do that. And is there a limit of amount of Bitcoin you can buy per year, and how long to wait until the tax-free kicks in? Until what age?
Well, I mean, if you're rolling over from an existing IRA or 401k, you can roll over the whole thing, and however much money you have in there, you can use all of it to buy Bitcoin. Okay. If you're making annual contributions, if you're not self-employed, the IRS limits to $6,000 in annual contributions each year. But like I said, rollovers don't count against that. So if you're doing a rollover from like a job, an old 401k account or an existing IRA, there's no limitation on that at all.
Okay. But you could start fresh with your own non-employer thing, right? Okay.
And then that would be, you'd be limited to $6,000 a year on that. Yeah.
Cool. $6,000 a year. So you buy it in Bitcoin, then whatever it does that year is just the investment, right?
Exactly. Right. The only limitation is on the actual annual contribution that you make. $6,000 a year if you're under 50 years old, $7,000 a year if you're over 50.
Okay. And then, but you can always sell into cash, including the fees and everything, and then that'll still be the non-taxable thing at the end.
Exactly. You got
and
it.
what was the age again that you can, like, how long does it have to sit before you can?
59 and a half.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Cool. Wow.
Next year for you. So we're good. Yeah. But
So theoretically you could I'm just thinking in terms of like a trader, you could keep buying the maximum amount every year, as most people do, or or at least near that.
Yeah.
And you could theoretically take scalp longs, just buying and selling into cash, as long as you cover fees and and then some, over and over again. And to just get all that tax free at the end by the time you're 59 and a half.
Yep. Okay. Absolutely. That's right.
So I think crazy. We know what we're doing. Next year. Yeah, for sure. That's cool.
I'll tell you who doesn't know what they're doing is damn China is messing with my holdings right now. I don't know what's going on. So I'm new to like the world of Bitcoin. I've been like buying and holding for a while, and just I don't know like the outside stories of it and stuff, but like, what is it with, like, I read in CNN today that China's just like, we don't like it. You can do whatever you do, but we don't encourage any businesses to take Bitcoin or anything. And this was like worse of a drop than than Elon Musk made
Yeah.
happen.
And this isn't the first time they've done that, right? Like I remember China crash a couple years or like a year and a half ago. Right?
Yeah, I
It was
think I remember that too.
Yeah,
China's very schizophrenic with the Bitcoin stuff. Yeah, like there's just like they'll ban it for a while, then they'll loosen up, and then they'll place some more restrictions there. They don't seem to have a really consistent Bitcoin policy per se.
And most of the miners are there, which makes it extra complicated, right? Where
the pools tend to be located there. Okay. Where the actual miners are that actually participate in the mining pools, that's a different story. I mean, a lot of them are in China too. China has cheap energy, and mining is going to go to wherever there's the cheapest energy, right? I mean, that's sort of the nature of it. That's the idea behind it. But excuse me, yeah, I mean, there is, no matter how you want to break it down exactly how much is in China, yes, it's very significant.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And I just have to interject and say I think this is the worst thing to come out of China in the last year and a half. Personally, the worst thing. Like I can't think of anything else. But it's nuts because like I just from like Twitter, I was never into like crypto Twitter, or at least like I didn't see anybody really even talking about it much until like Dogecoin, honestly, like where it would just like everybody was talking about some kind of altcoin or Bitcoin or something. But I thought it was funny. Like so many people, like, we come from kind of like a leftist background and stuff, but like a lot of people, like people hate Bitcoin. Yes. Like it's
nuts. Let's get into this. People, you're the perfect guy to ask about.
It's so weird because like for me, when I was like trying to navigate what my politics were, and I was like, well, the left seems like they're somewhat anti-establishment. Wrong. But then the like people are like, Bitcoin is horrible for the environment. It's it's never going to end up being anything, tangible as far as like a real currency and stuff. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, yeah, but I just want to get like a little bit rich. What is wrong with me just trying to make a little bit of money? I don't give a shit what it ends up becoming.
And I think there's a reaction against it's like one of those things where the type of person a Bitcoiner is, and they don't want to be that. They're like these fucking nerds and these libertarians
or pedophiles. It's like, you're a fucking pedophile. Yeah, exactly. It's like, what?
Your dark web fucking buying like research chemicals and shit.
Nothing wrong with that. A lot of it is because they just there's a host of things here. I mean, part of it is, the economic system I was going to say the West, but really the entire world, it really is very heavily dependent on having an inflationary fiat currency, right? Like the current system, the whole way our economy is set up, this very financialized economy that we live in, needs that to survive. It literally could not exist in a hard money system. So when you look at it through that, I guess, lens, like if you've got some, financial incentive to the current economic system, this has to be something that you're not going to like very much, right? So it makes sense in that regard that you'll just kind of come up with whatever reasons you possibly can to hate Bitcoin, hate people that are into Bitcoin, the whole 9 yards.
No, it's crazy because like I've seen some people that are like Bitcoin crashes and they're like, yeah, take that, pedophiles. I'm just like, I guess they're not talking to me.
It crashes from like it crashes a huge amount, but after it's gained from $3,000 just like a couple months ago, you know what I mean, or a year ago, right? That's the funny thing. They're like, and all those headlines that are every year like Bitcoin crashes, and then you see the price curve, and it's like it's just a fucking huge thing. And I get there are like valid criticisms of it, and people that are way too literal are kind of like, it's not cash, it's not the same thing, you can't buy stuff with, which is not true. You can buy stuff with it, but I get the critiques of it. But it's not about that. It represents something too, right? It's kind of like this is the first time this has been tried, and it worked like a charm. And honestly, and for the first iteration, it's fucking king, And I'm agnostic on, I'm not a maximalist or anything. You might be, I don't know. I'm not. I'm just kind of looking at this at the outside, and I just learned how to trade, and it's awesome asset to trade because it respects technical levels so well, and it's definitely it can be a gold mine, but it's just so, I don't know, the critiques are weird, and everyone's got an angle, And yeah, and definitely the anti-establishment thing. What's like, what's your solution?
Yeah, what are you, pro US dollar? Yeah, I'm big pro US dollar leftist. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's weird. So you know, the reason that I got into it was basically just, if you look at, have you guys ever looked at any of the charts that show all the different things that went haywire economically starting in 1971? So like if you look at the housing, so there's a website that's just literally these charts that I'm talking about. It's I think it's WTF happened in 1971.com.
Oh, I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like if you look at those, so 1971 for people who are listening is the year that the United States effectively came off the gold standard. I mean, what we had up until then wasn't a true gold standard, but it was sort of a quasi gold standard. And if you look at what happened from that point forward, basically economic inequality soared. A lot of people don't, particularly, you know, people on the left, I don't think really think about this very much, but one of the reasons for increasing inequality is, you know, when the money is not tied to a hard asset like gold, the government has the ability to print as much of it as they want. And when they print it, there's this concept called the Cantillon effect, which basically means the people that get the benefit of this newly printed money are the people that get it first. Because if I print a bunch of new dollars, that inflation doesn't start you know, popping up in prices of goods and, you know, what you're buying at the supermarket or whatever the case might be right away. The economy, the money, that newly printed money has to actually make it out into the economy for that to start happening. So the people that get handed that newly printed money first, they get the advantage of having all this new money, but still being able to buy stuff at the old prices, right? You know, being able to snap up assets at the old prices. Damn. So, and the people that get newly printed money first are by definition, big banks and the largest clients of the big banks that are the ones that get it next in line after them. So it's a major driver of economic inequality is the fiat system. And it also creates a thing where if you just want to be, you know, there was a time not that long ago, mid 20th century, where, I mean, you didn't, if you were just a regular person working a regular job, you could save and retire without like having to learn how to like play the stock market, right? It's very weird that we expect like just regular people to know how to invest. Like that's odd when you really take time to think about it. It doesn't really make much sense because that's not what their job is. Like if you're a plumber, your job is to be a plumber. If you're a dentist, your job is to be a dentist. It's not to understand the stock market, but you kind of have to, you know, get involved in that nowadays if you ever want to retire. But that wasn't always the case, right? If your money held its value better, you didn't necessarily have to do that. You could just save in a more traditional method. So that, to me, that's the appeal of Bitcoin. Bitcoin, like gold, is a hard money where it has a finite supply. It's preferable to gold because it's, you know, it's actually easier for government. Gold is less transparent because of the lack of a public ledger. So it's easier for governments to, and other entities to sort of manipulate the gold market, which is obviously a very common thing. And then also it kind of improves upon a lot of the downsides of gold, right? Like gold's heavy. So it's tough to make payments in gold because it's like, it's heavy. It's not easily divisible. Like if you can't really buy a cup of coffee in gold, like what are you going to shave like a tiny little, you know, thing off there? Like it would be
like garlic and Goodfellas. Like,
exactly. Like it's not really practical, but a Bitcoin is infinitely divisible, right? As many decimal places as you can imagine. I mean, the current algorithms only goes to 1/100 millionth, but that's not a fixed
a Satoshi, if you will. Right?
Yes, a Satoshi, exactly. So, I mean, that's the idea. It's basically just an improvement upon the gold standard and one that would be, you know, harder to censor or break to return to a fiat system. And my primary interest in it is sort of, I think it's, you know, when it comes to these sort of things, like these sort of economic issues, or if you want to sound libtarded, you can say economic justice issues or whatever. To me, like I'm an all of the above type of guy where, you know, I don't think that any potential solution that could improve the lot of average working people is worth taking a shot at. And I think Bitcoin is one of those solutions. I don't think it's the only one. I don't think it's the be all end all, but I think it's something that moves in the right direction. And that's why, you know, I'm involved in it.
Sounds pretty.
You're an EJW is what you are. That's funny.
And to your point on I resonated so much when you said like that you know, people need to figure out the stock market in order to have a shot at, you know, really living the good life or whatever. And I resonated with that because I look at this thing and I'm like, yeah, you know, it'll be challenging, but I can learn to trade this thing, and that's my only way out. You know, like I dropped out of school and I was just like doing wage stuff, you know, and I'm happy with that. You know, you know, but I know I'm not going to buy fucking land, you know, and start a farm with that kind of money, you know.
Yeah.
And
Not with
it's
Bill
like,
Gates owning everything, bud.
yeah, I just want a little, just give me a little slice, Bill. Yeah. Just one little
Melinda,
crumb of
yeah, either
pie.
one.
Yeah, Belinda. Yeah. So yeah, I was, and you know, and it is a funny thing, and all that whole rush of, you know, everyone is becoming a trader with the Robinhood apps now and shit, and everyone, you know, wants to let it ride, and obviously that pisses off, you know, with the whole Gamergate thing. That was super interesting. You know, people can get pissed off, hedge funds and whatnot, and of course, you know, like most retail will lose money trying to, trying to flip $10,000 or something. It's just kind of a fucked up thing if, you know, the more you get into it.
Yeah.
But I think that it's you know, the possibilities are really endless with this, and we're seeing that. And you must have felt, you know, you were into Bitcoin, like you said, like 3 years before it got major coverage. Did you feel like so red pilled or let in a little secret, you know, before everyone else? Like, how was that?
Yeah, I mean, so I got sort of involved in 2014 when it was still pretty obscure, right? And yeah, it was weird. I mean, I didn't I it's been more successful than obviously I even allowed myself to think about at the time, right?
Yeah.
Because we all kind of have a normalcy bias where we just kind of assume that things will change over time, but they'll change within sort of like a band or a range. You know what I mean? Like you don't see things like rapid change, rapid accelerating change is not something that I don't think human beings are sort of naturally primed to be on the lookout for. So it's been a lot more the uptake, the institutional adoption, all that stuff are things that in 2014 just weren't even on my radar.
Mm-hmm. What were you using back then to buy your first Bitcoin? How are you holding your keys? You know, what was available back then before that?
Yeah, so I bought initially. I did not hold my own keys, but I did start doing that pretty early on. And the first thing that I used for holding my own keys was the Trezor, when the Trezor was brand new, when the first Trezor like first came out.
The little wallet, the USB thing, or the
yeah, it's a USB thing. Yeah, exactly. Wow. That was the first hardware wallet that I had back in those days. In those days, there were probably Trezor and Ledger were the only two back then. I don't even remember for sure. You know, commercially available hardware wallets.
That's crazy. Yeah, it's it's funny because it's like you said, everybody at my work. I work in road construction. Everybody at my work is checking like the market, the crypto market now, and I think it's good, and I think that's part of the reason why there's so many like almost kind of nihilist leftists and people on the left, and that's the only people I ever really see mad about it. Like they're kind of like, it's some normie shit now, which is good. That's like objectively a good thing when normies get into something that's really not normal.
Just the fact that I could send you a trustless amount of something we call money, you know, just through a phone without anyone fucking with it or anything, you know, is just so powerful. Even if you have to interact with banks and fiat at some point, you know, it's just so cool. It's just, it's like nothing else for sure.
Well, and also, and I meant to ask Jeff this guy. I heard you talk about this on a Good Old Boys stream a little bit, and maybe if you could expand on it. But like, if the powers that be, whoever it is, you know, I mean, banks or anything like that, really want to take down Bitcoin, they'd have to go through the holders, right? Through the apps like the Coinbase and stuff to maybe halt transaction. Like, do you see that happening soon? Like,
well, so if you really wanted to ban Bitcoin, the way to do it, it would be really hard to just try and like get people to voluntarily turn over their Bitcoin, because it's hard. It would be hard to tell who even has it, right? Like where their keys are. There's not a real easy way to do that. The way to sort of go after Bitcoin would be to ban the exchanges that allow you to convert back and forth between fiat currency and Bitcoin, because that would obviously have a really severe impact on Bitcoin's value. And the whole gambit that you're making at least the way that I see it, when you're getting involved with Bitcoin, is I refer to it as turning the monster against Dr. Frankenstein. So what you want is you want these institutions that you don't like, or if you're like me that you don't like banks and investment funds, you actually want them to start investing in Bitcoin. Because the more that they start investing in Bitcoin, as much as I might hate them, the harder it is for the government then to sort of shut down the exchanges and negatively impact the value of Bitcoin, because someone they actually care about would be negatively impacted by it. Now, the sort of criticism of what I've just said is, well, you know, these institutions aren't stupid. They know that if this is a long-term threat to their institution, you know, why would they invest in it? Why wouldn't they just shut it down before they invested in it? And I think what that view fundamentally fails to consider is that institutions are made up of people. So if you work at some institution that in the long term is negatively going to be impacted by Bitcoin, but at the same time you realize its potential value, it actually doesn't make sense for you to work to try and shut it down. It makes sense for you to try and buy it and invest in it and make yourself rich. What do you care if the bank you work for, you know, if it shortens their lifespan, as long as you get rich? So again, it's sort of, that's where I come into the term, you know, turning the monster against Dr. Frankenstein. You're using people's own greed to prevent this thing from being shut down.
It's almost like owning the means of your production.
Yes, there you go. Yeah.
Which the left tends to hate, I guess, now. So, all right. Interesting.
That's
noted.
So
and that's crazy. But so I was gonna pivot a little bit here because you know, in typical cryptocurrency fashion, let's get into some COVID truther stuff too. So let's just lean into it.
Is that the same? You sent me the Good Old Boys with Jeff, right?
This was I started. I started listening
so hard. I was like, we got to get this guy on. Thanks.
It was one of the COVID episodes where you guys were just talking about COVID.
Like and right up our alley with the COVID.
I know. And I was new. I was actually really new to the Good Old Boys. I had never really listened to them, and I love them, by the way. It's awesome, and it's cool to hear somebody so different from such a different part of like they're so different territorially and just culturally and stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm like, I totally could like get down with these dudes on something if something ever popped off. Like I'm just like, they get it, you know. And so I heard you on there, and speaking of getting it, there's only a few people that at least I see that truly understand what the hell's going on with COVID right now, where even if people now are becoming a little more truther and stuff, buying into the lab leak stuff, you were out on masks early, right? I mean, you were actually pro mask early before anybody was pro mask.
Correct.
Which and me too. Like I freaked out when nobody was freaking out. And then, I mean, it's like I sound like some hipster or something, but no, it's I freaked out. Yeah. When I'm like in a Morrissey shirt.
Which is rational, by the way, because what you did is you worried about it at the time when we didn't know jack shit about it. And then when it became apparent that it wasn't nearly as dangerous as it may have been, or as, you know, those preliminary crazy videos we saw were, you know, it's entirely rational at that point to say, okay, like based on this new information, you know, I'm going to reevaluate my position.
Yeah.
You just summed up the whole fucking thing. And that's the funny thing. We're always accused of like not caring about this shit or thinking that we want like people to die or something. It's like we're the ones that want this best taken care of, you know. That's the thing.
We're at 9% unemployment right now. Evictions are starting to kick in across the country. It hasn't kicked in yet. Like the part we're scared about hasn't kicked in yet. That's why I keep telling people it's the same problem when people talk about vaccines. It's like, oh, I've been fine, I got it 2 weeks ago, I'm good. It's like, you don't know. You're literally never don't like none of this shit is like I'm erring on the side of like just doing what I've been doing. You know what I'm saying? Like taking care of myself and doing that. But like, it's like, it's nice to know, like it's kind of, I don't know how you feel about this, Jeff, because you kind of see some of your predictions and our predictions the same, like, and the stuff we've been talking about for a while when it was taboo, and you start to see it creep into the mainstream. And do you get like frustrated by it? Or are you a little bit happy by it? Because I'm frustrated that I think the damage is done, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think the damage is done because I mean, I'll get the way that the arc of this thing all went, you know, I think that in the beginning, sort of the mainstream or the ruling class or whatever you want to call it, as we just talked about, we were on opposite sides there. Like guys like you and I were very, very concerned about it. And they were all telling us like, nah, get over it. Go to a Chinese restaurant. Remember that whole thing? Make sure you go to your local Chinese restaurant.
DoorDash your Chinese restaurant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Make sure you do that. Make sure. Yeah, exactly.
And like all that stuff. And then I think two things happened. One, they actually got a little bit scared that it would be serious. And number two, once they started with, lockdowns and all that sort of stuff, they realized that it could be played to an advantage in a couple different ways. Number one, it was a useful tool to crush small capital and funnel that capital upwards to the largest holders of capital. It's been incredibly effective at that. And then number two, they realized like, oh man, we can use this to make sure that our guy wins the presidential election. I mean, I think that was, in there as well. I still, to this day, don't quite understand why sort of our ruling class in the United States was so terrified by Donald Trump, because it didn't seem like he did very much to counter their interests, although that wasn't rhetorical. But I guess even the rhetoric, they felt they needed to stamp out, lest the next guy, take it more seriously.
Well, and they were worried about the next guy. Yeah,
exactly.
And they were doing even less. That's the sad part. In Donald Trump. Like,
it's like that's true.
You couldn't even jump ahead of it. You couldn't even be like, well, we see you're Donald Trump and raise you this. They couldn't even do that. It was like, nah, he's fascist and get back to where, stay in your house and do that. And it's also wild too, that you needed COVID and all this Silicon Valley weirdo, like fortifying the election stuff to happen, to beat him, to be the host of The Apprentice, like for a second term. Like it's just nuts.
Because people are desperate for something different. You know what I mean? Desperate for a change. And I think the fact that such drastic measures had to be taken, I think is sort of evidence of that. But anyway, what I think happened after we when you want to do something like that, let's operate under the assumption that COVID was hyped up at that point for the cynical reasons that I just gave, right? You have to build an infrastructure around that. Even if, let's say, the people that are really pulling the strings here are doing it cynically, you need like a whole infrastructure of people to enforce this stuff. You need a scientific community that's going to promulgate guidelines, regulations, you know what I mean? Things like that to sort of support this whole narrative that you're pushing. Yeah. And when you do that, a lot of times the most effective people to serve in those positions, sort of those middle management positions, are true believers. And when you empower those people and you create an infrastructure like that, it can sometimes get out of hand. And I think that this actually did go further probably than they would have liked.
I was gonna ask. Yeah. We're all on the same page on that. It seems a little,
Yeah, I think it did get a little bit out of hand because they sort of, when you put people in these positions, they do accrue real power. I mean, they're not, as powerful as like the ruling class per se, but they do have some level of real power because they're setting the everyday on the ground regulations.
Yeah.
So I think it just sort of got way out of hand with these guys like, like Eric Ding and some of these people that you see on Twitter. And I think that that's why they've had to be so aggressive so quickly on getting people to take their masks off, which they're having trouble with, by the way, if you notice.
Expect that.
They're having trouble getting people to do that. And a lot of the epidemiology community thinks that we should be wearing them for another year, which is insane. But that's just a side effect of what happens when you sort of empower the true believers, and then at the same time you deplatform the scientists that were more skeptical, which were definitely out there, the John Ioannidis, people like that, who were deplatformed. So
who called it correctly?
Who basically called it correctly.
Yeah,
exactly.
within like a tenth of a percent max.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. That's crazy.
And then the other thing that's really interesting are the people that are the true politicians, like Fauci. You know what I mean? Like when you're the head of the CDC or you're the head of the NIOSH, that's actually not really a science job. That's a politics job. It sort of has to be by its nature because you're sort of interacting with the political system. And those people like Walensky and Fauci have sort of, they'll just change their position overnight to whatever the, narrative that's being pushed is. And in Fauci's case, he'll even just say like, oh yeah, I was full of shit before. You know what I mean? Like
that was
pretty
the old
much
me.
admitted that when he was talking to Rand Paul during the Senate hearings,
I love that
he was just basically full of shit. You know what I mean? Like he's like, like basically that's just, what he's saying. But
speak on that Rand Paul thing a little bit, because I think a lot of the mainstream take was like Rand Paul gets roasted by Fauci. I did that whole that I accidentally hit. The
Rand Paul got beat up by his neighbor.
Yeah.
So how could you? Yeah.
And it's like, well, and I don't know. Rand Paul's useful insofar as just putting someone, feet to the fire on the lab leak thing. Even if it's messy, even if it's whatever, and that shit, man, it's just like it is possible that Fauci's decisions led to gain of function research in Wuhan that caused coronavirus to escape. That's a possibility, and that would be the most insane possible. Like, if you couldn't write a better novel than the guy that's basically the head of this whole, this weird cult that we're living in. Is the start of this shit? Is literally the source, even if accidentally, let's just assume that.
Yeah,
it's insane. I just can't stop tripping on it. And even people that are into like this COVID stuff, like we are they're kind of like, whatever, like he's not important. And I'm just like, man, but that's so beautiful. That'd be so funny. Yeah, so I don't know.
But just touching back on the Rand Paul thing for a second too. I think that a lot of people think that Rand Paul is an optometrist, which he's not. He's a physician, man. Like he's like an eye surgeon. So he's not just some buffoon talking to Fauci about these issues. You know what I mean? Like that was so odd about the sort of reactions to that initial interview. And then, of course, Rand Paul ends up being sort of validated in the end.
Yeah, because people say like, oh, are you a doctor? It's like, no, I listen to doctors. It's not like there's actual doctors that say, I don't know if anyone remembers this. I remember Sai sent me this video a long time ago, and I was still not quite there yet. Like that this was all bullshit, but like, I wasn't quite there yet. But do you remember that video, Sai, where it was like those doctors are like, dude, this shit's bullshit. Like they're all in there. Like it was in like March, dude. And they're like, this is bullshit. And like, and they're like, Fauci should be in prison. And I'm like, whoa, it was weird. It was like too much for me. I was like, oh my God, no, I can't do it. It was crazy. They took it off the internet.
And if you talk, by the way, I mean, I had the opportunity through this. I was lucky. I kind of made some connections when I was kind of doing my own research on this. And if you talk to scientists and physicians off the record, a lot of them believed this. They just weren't able to vocalize this because of what they knew it would do to their career. You know what I mean? To sort of come out against the dominant narrative. So they just kind of shut up about it. But many of them did know these things. They just were sort of hoping that it would all blow over,
And what I find funny about this is people don't realize it. Is scientists, doctors, and stuff are forced into a narrative. They're forced to believe a narrative. And this isn't even just COVID. This is for a lot of things, food, any things like that. They're forced into a narrative and then put on a pedestal, like ahead of, like higher than most people, as long as you fit that narrative. So it's like they pump up your job title and then tell you what it has to be. And it's like basically creating its own monster. And then, basically deplatforming anybody who's just like, hey, can we do some science? They're like, no, we can't. And it's brutal.
It's just funny that for a lot of people, for a lot of like normies, as we say, that this is the first time that some of them might be going, wait, the CDC might lie to us, which is, if you've been in this, you've known for a long time that, that's going on, which is why it's been so frustrating for me, because I just know too much about these organizations to trust them one iota. And I'm sure you all feel the same.
Yeah.
I mean, the CDC is interesting because I'm hearing a lot of people say that why would they lie? They're an independent organization that, they're not making money off the vaccines, which is totally false. And like they're basically a vaccine corporation.
Yeah.
And I don't know, we don't have to get into vaccines, like whether they're effective or not. That's everyone has different.
We do that every week, but
But just the fact that they hold lots of patents in vaccines, and that's their main tool and their whole agenda, regardless of what you think about them, is interesting to note, and you wouldn't be wise to dismiss that out of hand. I would feel
Absolutely.
just to say it in a totally approachable way, I guess,
Mhm.
for anyone listening. Yeah.
And it's funny because just pivoting to the masks, because the masks are very funny. Like just this last weekend, I was in Marin, and it's like anybody who doesn't know the Bay Area, like Marin is like, it's like rich lib. It's like everybody is like Get Out, like the movie Get Out, the phrenologists like and stuff that they go, like the race science people. Every single person is like that out there. And this is a great farmers market, outdoors, having a good time. And it's like, masks, please wear a mask. And I'm thinking here, I'm like, everybody here is vaccinated, I bet. Like everybody, they sprinted to the line, like Chariots of Fire music playing in the background to get a Pfizer shot. And I'm thinking, and I'm seeing 4-year-old kids getting pulled around in a wagon with a mask on. And like,
yeah, that's the thing, is
it's so wild.
The logical conclusion these guys have come to is that adults are free to roam if you've been vaccinated, but kids still have to wear masks.
And this is like a cow. You open up the door of like a farm where the cow's going to get slaughtered, and the cow's like, I kind of like it here, and they're like, that's kind of nice, and these people, I saw people double masking outdoors at this thing, and it's a political statement at this point. And they're trying so hard to get this experimental vaccine to children, like just to get that last demographic in there in their numbers. And I don't think the masks are going away. I mean, whether it's written into law or not, I don't think the masks are going away for a while. I think, like the epidemiologists were saying, they should do it for a year. I think people are going to do it for at least another 6 months.
I think it's going to be very regional. I think in the Northeast and in places like the Bay Area, that wouldn't surprise me if that's how it pans out. Yeah.
Portland. And you got out of the Northeast, man, right?
I did.
You got out.
Where were you?
New Jersey.
Oh, word.
Yeah, in New Jersey, didn't the governor say something like recently? The governor was like, no, we're still doing masks.
Yeah,
like,
New Jersey, California, and God, I think there's one other state are the only 3 left still doing masks. So you guys in California are till June 15th.
Weird date too. Weird date for Gavin Newsom to just decide that.
Pick. Yes.
Yeah, he's just like, 2 months ago, people did a chronicle of Gavin Newsom quotes about masks per month. It was really funny. And like one of them was like, you are literally, it was like, this was March. He was like, you're literally a murderer if you don't wear a mask. And then like June 15th, he's like, yeah, go ahead. Yeah. He's like, take it out, which is ironic because he's being recalled right now. So putting pressure on your elected officials can get you, one, he's talking about a California stimulus, and 2, he's talking about getting rid of the mask. So it's like, people are like, oh no, we can't push, we're scared of the conservatives, so we gotta let the liberals do what they do. No, put heat on Newsom, get rid of these damn masks.
That's what's up.
New Jersey, I don't think still has a date at all. At least in California, you guys have June 15th. I believe New Jersey's I think Murphy's quote was just like, we're just not quite there yet. It's all he said. I don't even know what that means.
No numbers involved. Just no numbers. And it's funny because speaking of numbers, with the children, when I saw this kid with a mask on, it like broke my heart, because it's just like, in 2021, I get if you did it at first, all right, whatever, that's not a big deal, but like you did it at first. This kid's probably been wearing a mask for over a year. I don't not trying to say, because I haven't seen anything on it, but there's gonna be some stuff that happens. Like, did you mess with your kid? Did our kids' breathing patterns messed up 3 years from now or something? I could totally see.
I think more so than that, it's going to be their whole, like, young kids have to see faces to learn like emotions and like nonverbal communication and all that stuff. Yeah. So that's what I would worry mostly about.
But this was from the, let's see. Yeah. I don't know. This is like the Intelligencer, I guess is a New York magazine. But they were saying that, that new research suggests that the number of kids hospitalized for COVID, it's a bit much, right? Is what they were saying. Like, they basically are saying that everything that we've been saying for the longest time, that the numbers aren't right, because that's really what should have done it for people, right? If you're a science stressor, look at the numbers. But you were told not to do your own research because you don't know anything. You're a disgusting pig and you don't know anything. Don't do your own research. That's what people were saying for a while. But they're saying it's as the ICU numbers, which is what basically fueled the lockdowns. in hospitals, and they were saying the children ICU was overcounted by like 40% or something.
Yeah, and it was related to the difference between being hospitalized with COVID versus for COVID. And the funny part about that is like the whole with for controversy was considered like, you know, as recently as a few months ago, that was considered like some sort of right-wing insane trope thing.
And it was the most obvious fact about the whole thing. That was the craziest, you know. That was the weird thing, is it was the most obvious fact, but it was immediately got othered, you know, into, you couldn't have that take. Yeah, like the forced take. You can't,
or that Instagram thread that I sent you the other day where it was all these it was all these nurses that were like, some lady like left a meme that said like, hey nurses, like what's been going on at your guys' hospital, COVID protocols, like how do you feel about it, like sound off in the comments, which I felt like was kind of like some Fed shit to say, honestly. But whatever, it led to some great content.
Tag your location,
location, hospital, badge number, and but like a lot of nurses were like, this is horse shit, this sucks. My ICU's been empty for like over a year now. I mean, just not, at least not filled more than it normally would be.
Yeah.
Bad. And it's like nurse after nurse commenting and stuff. And like, you click on some of these pictures, I'm like, well, is this person a nurse? And they're like in scrubs and stuff, like in their pictures and stuff. It's not, I mean, you know.
Yeah. And it's the
crazy.
opposite of what the propaganda campaign wants. So it's not like it's I wouldn't say it's some other side battling it out. It's an authentic response to what's going on in the, you know, in the field, basically. Yeah. And I was reading about the field hospital they built in some like tennis arena, where they only served like 55 people or something like that. And they were paying nurses like $2,000 a day just to chill on their iPhones or whatever. And they all felt good. They were like, we feel guilty because this is,
well, that's who made all the TikToks then, right? The nurse TikToks. That's how they were doing that from the field hospitals, probably. But
man, it's so weird how like just like a epiphenomenon can just reverberate and something becomes true just from like a performance or just a little cover up or something. It's very strange. And yeah, none of us are saying people aren't dying from COVID. That's the thing. You know what I mean? It's not like some crazy thing. And there's the flu thing too. But you nailed it on that other podcast with the masks, because I held onto the masks for a little while too. I was never into them. I was just like, whatever, I don't mind doing.
Yeah, not a big deal. Yeah, I'll wear it.
When you just see data after data, just chart after chart of like mask mandate, boom, and then boom, it's like no correlation, sometimes inverse correlation. And yeah, it's incredible. You got anything else to say about masks?
Yeah, I mean, just that if you look at the actual like controlled trials on masks, I mean, there's just no benefit, right? The only, studies that show significant benefit to masks are basically just computer models where like they'll put a guy in a mask in like a tube and have him breathe real hard and then try to extrapolate that data, out to what should happen based on a scientific model that really has no basis in reality, right? But when you actually look at controlled trials for masks, even COVID specific ones, of which there are not many, but they're out there, they don't really show much benefit. And then, I mean, just a more generalized fashion with regard to these surgical masks, different issue because you're talking about wound infection. But a lot of people think that surgical masks, that physicians wear those in surgery to prevent, infections, but they don't. I mean, we know really, really strong evidence that they don't even do that. I mean, in the largest study that was done on that point was done in the 80s in the United Kingdom, where it was the Neil Orr, I believe, the Orr study. In a hospital there, they basically just for like 6 months or something, just did all their surgeries with no masks. And then they just compared the infection data to what they had, infection data that they had collected for the, 30 years prior of doing surgeries with masks. And they actually found a very small decrease in infection by getting rid of masks. So, the criticism of what I just said there is that, you're talking about bacterial infection rather than a respiratory viral infection. But at the end of the day, it's all respiratory particulates that you're worried about blocking. And the COVID studies that we do have that are controlled trials for COVID and influenza basically correspond to that and show that there's really not much, if any, benefit at all to wearing these things. It was just sort of a totem that I think the masking really started because they had scared the crap out of people, but they still needed, essential workers to go into work every day. You know what I mean? They needed people that worked in the grocery store, in the pharmacy, DoorDash drivers that brought all these, scared people
brought
their
the slop to your trough.
Yeah, exactly. They needed all those people to go to work. So they they could have used an amethyst amulet if they wanted to, but they had to come up with something, that would make these people feel safe. And what they sort of came up with was the masks, and then it sort of, as we discussed, as these things are wont to do, it just sort of from that point going forward, just took on a life of its own.
Totally did.
Yeah. It's funny. So the last thing I wanted to talk about with you, because you had a tweet about a couple weeks ago, and I thought it was so funny because this is around the time that Joe Rogan said that young healthy people don't, in his opinion, not, and the guy calls himself an idiot, which is funny, but then people assign him like, MD after his name and then criticize him. It's really weird. And then he said, oh yeah, they don't need the vaccine, but you said I would have Joe Rogan be the head of CDC, and I'm serious. Which, like, dude. I agree. Like, I mean, I think we'd be in better.
If Joe Rogan's advice, if we did just take vitamin D, that's all he did, it would transform the entire arc of humanity. I'm convinced. If you just extend our lifespan by like 4 years minimum, we wouldn't have like cold or flu like we do now. Yeah, it's crazy. That was beautiful.
You just got some sun and some exercise and maintained a healthy weight. Yeah, I mean, what more do you need at that point compared to what we got now?
But they make you like, there's trails out here in the Bay Area, like running trails, and they're like, masks got to be on. You're like, what? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, it makes weird. They made it hard to work out, like, which is insane. You know what I mean? Because like, the sweat droplets could, and it's the weirdest thing. But like, I laughed at Joe Rogan. I hate that Joe Rogan backs down off this shit, though. That's the one thing I hate about him. Why? Spotify is not going to fire you. Like, they would have already. They would have never signed you. They've had like, doesn't he have like Stefan Molyneux on his show?
He just has to hedge. Yeah, exactly. He's just doing a hedge. He's like doing a Bitcoin like 1x short. He's like, well, maybe I'm wrong. So
I know. And he always says, oh, I love like the New York Times and stuff. It's like, they hate you. Like, they don't like you. Like, none of these people like you. Stop it. Just double down. Like, he'll say a great point, and then he's like, what do I know? I'm retarded. And it's like, well, and
you know what I love about the Rogan thing, when he came out and said after, but he's like, yeah, Biden and his team hit us up if we could come on, and we're like, no, we're not doing it. I love that. It's so funny to me.
I do it. I would love if Biden just by himself, nobody did a 3-hour Rogan, like with his brain the way it is.
That would be something to see.
God, dude.
That'd be one for ages, dude.
Just have a soft serve ice cream machine ready for him to go, man. Like, no, it'd be unbelievable. But yeah, it's like, it's funny, like, because I'm always like, I put a tweet out one time where I was like, show me on the doll where Joe Rogan hurt you, because like, that's where like, what? I'm sorry, you cannot assign these people job titles that they don't have. He's a podcaster. He was a famous comedian. He was a host of a TV show. He had a platform. Obviously, a lot of people like him, but they assign him like more power than Biden. Like, they make, you know what I mean? It's just nuts to me. And
that's his threat, is he's so popular and he just represents a normal dude,
or like the Spotify employees saying like, I just don't feel comfortable working here anymore now that Joe Rogan's here. Yeah.
Bog Beef has this theory that there are certain people that, because they sort of freestyle when they speak, even if they don't say anything, and some of these people don't even say anything that controversial, but just even the idea that they might say something controversial because they're not on a specific sort of script, that makes them really mad. You know what I mean? And a couple of the other examples he gave were like, it could be really disparate types of people. Like Andrew Yang and Charles Barkley are both like that too. You know what I mean? Like, similar situations and get similar, reactions.
I remember Charles Barkley was like, Yeah, all I'm saying is these protests, BLM protests are cool, but all I'm saying is if you get pulled over, listen to the officer, and like everyone's like, "Whoa, what's like stop it?" It's like he's like, "Oh, I come from like 3 generations of cops," and so I remember that. That's funny. And yeah, that's just like I mean, I would any of us three, I would put at the top of the CDC. You know what I mean? I'd put a team around us, of course, but like it's funny that like I was talking about this on our last episode, like the liberals and the people who in the left especially that always call for somebody to have accountability when they're, you know, canceling them and stuff. Oh, it's accountability, but it's like, will they ever be accountable by completely botching this stuff? They will never be accountable by it. I don't think they will never ever live it down. I mean, that's why, you know, we all do what we do, right? Is to like, you got to hammer it home, man. Like the data never showed that you needed to lock down.
Yeah.
It never. It's nuts. Yeah. I don't know what to. I don't know. Like, because I feel like, and I was talking to Jeff before this. Like in 2016, when everything changed. Like, I don't know some of my friends anymore. Like, I don't know them. Even during COVID. Like California's been horribly locked down. I've had 2 friends check on me, which is like a cell phone. It's an L on my part. Like, hey, whoa, 2 friends, right? Like I've had 2 friends that I don't normally talk to go, hey, how's everything going? I could have been dead for a year. And like, we've become, especially out in the Bay Area, and I'm sure Jeffy felt this way in New Jersey. It's like, there is no sense of community anymore. And I think it was ruined in 2016, not by Trump, but just Trump was at the helm of it. And then
it's
now we'll never get it. I don't think we'll get it back for a long time. You know, it'd be with this COVID stuff. It was the perfect way to break up any sense of community because your people inside your own community could murder you with advice.
Like the COVID thing was like an accelerant to a society-wide trend that had been brewing for a while, but it was like just sort of lit a match to it, you know, or pour gasoline on it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It didn't cause anything. It was the cause of other things. Like, can you imagine a pandemic like this, quote unquote, without the smartphone? You know
one of the things I talked about very early on is like none of this pandemic would have happened without the internet. Or without high-speed internet. You know what I mean?
You couldn't have even done it in like 07. You know what I mean? Yeah, it wouldn't have worked.
They would have needed people to go to work and exactly.
Yeah. And it's like now, like the company my dad works at, they were down from like 7 offices down to 1. You know, it's like a capitalist wet dream. You know what I mean? It's like I have all these people at home. I can monitor them through their computer. I know what they're doing. And then, it's nuts. But Jeff, we really appreciate you coming on, man.
Thanks for having me, guys. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no problem. So I mean, we had a pretty problematic episode. All we did was talk about Bitcoin, COVID truther, and Joe Rogan. So I mean, that's pretty much
this is bread and butter for us.
Always your favorites. I know. There you go.
Yeah, I was telling like my mom was like, you listen to Joe Rogan? And I was just like,
oh god,
like, what? 3 million people do. Like some niche guy.
Like, Oprah?
It's like exactly. I mean, like, there's people like Alyssa Milano crying about not having the same numbers as Joe Rogan. That was the funniest thing when she's like, my podcast doesn't do as well as Joe Rogan. It's like, it just sucks, and nobody does. Well, and nobody could see you. That's the thing, right? Oh, so like, no, I mean, what was the reason anybody liked her? And so Jeff, go ahead and drop everywhere where people can find you for now, and just do any plugs that you have, and go ahead.
Yeah, sounds good. Easiest way to find me is probably on Twitter at Vandroux ATTYCPA, or you can go to my website keykeeperira.com, and that's basically the 2 best ways to find me. Every Tuesday night, I do the Good Old Boys live stream with Bog Beef and Merrick, so that's a lot of fun. You can check us out there as well.
Yeah, that's a very worthy Patreon subscription, I have to say. As a patron myself, that's a very worthy thing. Those guys do really good work. Would love to talk to them one day, actually. So that'd be good. So
awesome.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Jeff. That's our episode. Everybody knows where to find us. If you listen to the show, I'm at Glenn Rockney. He's at CryptoSci. That's PSI. And this is at RareCandy Pod 1 on Twitter. Appreciate everybody for tuning in.
Peace.